Good evening. Welcome to the Board of Trustees meeting for the Village of Pleasantville. Today is Monday, October 10. If you are watching live on Monday, October 10, we encourage you to call in if you have any comments or questions. Our call-in number is 769-1677. You can also watch us live at pctv76.org and with on-demand webcasts thereafter, or on Verizon Fios or Cablevision Optimum service. Our next work session is Monday, October 17 at 7 p.m. and our next regular meeting is Monday, October 24. The schedule has changed a little bit for that Monday because it is also the date of our annual joint work session with the Pleasantville School Board. So we will meet here at Village Hall on Monday, October 24 at 7:30 in a joint meeting with the school board, and then segue to our regular Village Board meeting at 9 p.m. So, the first item of business tonight on our agenda is the very happy occasion of promoting a police officer, Juan Garcia, to the rank of sergeant. I invite Chief Love to introduce this.
Good evening, all. Welcome. Mayor Scher, Board of Trustees, Village Administrator Dwyer. This is a great moment for the Pleasantville Police Department. For many years, we've been providing services to the people of Pleasantville with more officers than we have today. With the trying times and the financial woes, we've been trying to do more with less over the past few years. Our department, once at 26, is now at 20. Last week, I came to the Village Board and I asked the Mayor, the Board of Trustees, if they would please grant me a position of a police officer, which they graciously did. We hired Officer Thomas Woods last Monday night, and he became the 20th member of the Pleasantville Police Department. I have a lot of confidence in the board, and I think and believe that they have a lot of confidence in me. Since I've taken over as the Chief of Police in May 31st, we've been making a lot of changes and trying to provide the best possible services we can to the Village of Pleasantville with the limited resources that we've had. And Mayor and Board, thank you for trusting me and allowing me to hire and make a promotion of Officer Garcia tonight to the rank of sergeant. It's very important to have officers move through the department and get promoted and to maybe someday take over the reins of the police department. At this point, all but 2 of our supervisors in the Pleasantville Police Department have 20 years of service and can retire at any time. So it's our task to bring younger officers and newer officers to us, to the village, and bring them along and train them, and someday have them take over. And Juan Garcia is one of those people. And I'm very proud to be able to promote him to sergeant this evening. I see Juan has a lot of family and friends here, his wife Lori. Sorry to say his daughter Samantha could not be here. She's at college, but I'm sure she's very proud of you.
She's watching online.
I'm sure
You can give her a shout out, yes.
There's numerous members of the Pleasantville Police Department here in support of you, Juan, in support of the department. Lieutenant Wilson and I myself have discussed this for a long period of time and believe that you will handle this position very well. Juan, would you please come up?
Juan, I echo those thoughts on behalf of the board. You're a person who came to the village, and in the years you've been here as an officer, have knit yourself into the village in countless ways, serving as a volunteer in various ways, and bringing your family here. And we are delighted not only to have you here, but to see you advance to this well-deserved rank. So it is my pleasure, as well as my honor, to ask you to raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Juan Garcia, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and that I will faithfully discharge
and I will faithfully discharge
the duties of police sergeant
the duties of police sergeant
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
Welcome, Sergeant.
Hold on. Lori, will you please come up? We'll now have Juan's wife, Lori, hit him with his new sergeant shield. Please be careful. I'm going to need him for a while.
I just would like to thank the board and the chief and the lieutenant for the confidence they deposited on me, and I try to do my best. Thank everybody for coming out, and have a good night.
I think we should just go ahead and push one resolution ahead of the others, and then we'll return to you, but we'll do one resolution ahead, and that is number 202. Steve.
Resolved the Board of Trustees of the Village of Pleasantville, based upon the recommendation of the police chief, hereby appoints Juan Garcia to the position of police sergeant, effective October 11th, 2011, at 12 a.m. at a salary of $105,272. As per the rules and regulations of the Westchester County Department of Human Resources, said appointment is subject to a probationary period of not less than 52 weeks to a maximum of 78 weeks.
Is there a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion approved. I thank you all for coming on behalf of Juan.
The resolution.
I encourage you to stay if you are very much interested in our audit. If you're not, feel free to leave. Thank you a lot for coming to support Sergeant Garcia. The next item of business on our agenda is the report from O'Connor, Davies, Munns, and Dobbins on our 2010-2011 audit. Welcome, gentlemen. You can share. Welcome. Thank you for coming.
Anybody need a copy to refer to?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Mine
Some
home.
extras.
Okay.
Thank you. No problem. We need these back, though.
Okay, thanks. Oh, I can't write.
Well, the good news, guys, is you're following that horrendous
Follow the
reason.
actuaries.
You always want to follow an actuary.
Worse than that.
It's like
Almost
following an
nothing you can
undertaker.
say.
Yeah.
Better news.
Yeah.
Don't
Yeah,
follow
the last, jeez.
It's good you broke it up with this stuff.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
driving
This is the
driving
good
a Bill
stuff.
Nothing like finding out you're
Yeah.
$15 million in a hole.
Jonathan, it's like running when Bill Flukes is driving and you're running across the street.
Exactly.
All right. Welcome.
We're used to people walking out on us.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm used to going after kids get awards and police are promoted and everything, and then we come charging it. So it's always very exciting. So good evening. As you said, we're here tonight to present the results of the audit for the year ended May 31st, 2011. And during this presentation, we will also touch on some of the stuff that Ed, the actuary, touched on with you prior to this meeting. You'll see some of those numbers are in this audit report for you.
Great.
Great news. So basically, the audit report you have in front of you, even though we prepare this document on behalf of the village, really the only part of it that belongs to us is the auditor's opinion, which appears right after the table of contents. And what we've issued is what's known as a clean opinion or an unqualified opinion on the district's finances. That's really the highest level of assurance that an auditor can provide its client. It basically says that we believe these financial statements fairly present the results of operations. It is not a judge on how well your finances or how poor your finances are. It just says the numbers that you're reporting are fairly stated. So the village operates a variety of funds. We're just going to focus our few minutes tonight here on the general fund, which is your primary operating fund. We'll run through some of these numbers with you. Certainly, interrupt me if you have any questions. The general fund in summary form appears on page 46 of the audit report. Page 46 is the income statement for the general fund, and page 47 gives you a comparative to where the similar numbers were for the prior year that ended May 2010. Also, more detail for the numbers that appear on page 46 and 47 actually also begins on pages 48 and runs through several pages to page 53 if you want to see a little more detail. And that's where we're getting a lot of the information that we're gonna tell you about. So if you look on page 46, the top third of the page are your revenue sources that are used to support your operations. So you could see, and it's presented in columnar format. So the first column is the original budget, the budget that was approved by you, the board, back in the spring of 2010 for your operations for the 10-11 year. And then the second column is the final budget. So as you move through the year, sometimes budget adjustments are made. Either revenue estimates are modified for revenues you didn't expect to come in, but also expenditures could also be modified. Sometimes there is no revenue source, but you have an expense to pay, so sometimes you have to take money from your savings account or your fund balance to pay those obligations. So the top third of the page are the revenue sources, and as we all know in Westchester, the main revenue source is the property tax levy. So you can see the, excuse me, the first line had estimated property taxes coming in at just over $9 million. And your actual results in the third column show that the taxes actually came in at $8.9 million. So about $114,000 short of budget estimate. Due really to two items. There was a tax certiorari payment that had to be made, and the tax certiorari portion of the payment that relates to 10-11 taxes, refunds of 10-11 property taxes, goes against the revenue account, goes against the property tax revenue. The balance of the tax certiorari refunds you'll see in a minute is in the expenditure section for refunds that relate to prior year's tax levies. So again, that's the main revenue source, $8.9 million. The next main revenue source, you see a couple of lines down from that, is what's called the category non-property taxes. That's just a fancy way of saying like county sales tax distribution, also the utilities gross receipts tax, some cable franchise fees. Those things are in that category. So compared to budget, it did about $104,000 better than budget, almost offsetting the shortfall in the property tax levy. And the number was slightly better if you compare it to the same column on page 47 for the prior year. You see there was about a $40,000 increase in that revenue. So that held, and it shows that sales tax distribution is not where it was 2-3 years ago before things hit in 2008, but it seems to have leveled off, seems to have stabilized somewhat. Your departmental income on the next line is the next big number, estimated at around $900,000 and so, and it came in at about $1,040,000. Also, better than budget by $112,000, and a little better than the comparable number from the prior year of $1,014,000. So again, those departmental income charges are basically like your parks charges, your recreation charges, your zoning fees, planning fees, all those kinds of charges for services when people come to the village. And then as you move down the column, if you move down in the state aid revenue category, you don't get a lot of state aid to support your budget. And it's actually somewhat of a misnomer because the majority of this state aid is really the mortgage tax distribution from the county. I guess the state wants credit for the mortgage tax that you get, so they make us classify it as state aid. But you can see your state aid is really a minimal amount of your overall general fund budget. So overall, your revenues, as you can see in the first two columns, were estimated about $11.8 million or so, and you came in at about $12.1 million. So overall, your revenues came in about $235,000 better than budget. Very consistent if you look to the page 47, the similar number. So again, right on target and similar to last year.
What's the miscellaneous?
Miscellaneous, some of that is some refunds.
Yeah, refund the prior year's taxes. A chunk of it is the Con Ed money you received for them taking down trees in a previous year, about $60,000 or $65,000.
What was the peak in non-property taxes?
Oh, that I would have to go back and research for you. But I mean, I think obviously everybody in Westchester is down, but it was probably 2006, 2007.
But what you don't know what kind of numbers those might have been?
Oh, the amounts? That offhand, I don't recall.
We have those numbers too.
Yeah, we can give you detail.
The sales tax that we received back from the county, do you estimate in here? Because the fourth quarter isn't really.
But this is the year that ended.
Well, this is the year that ended May 31st.
May 31st.
So it's sales tax.
Up in
You get
the
a
first two
distribution like in
quarters.
August,
Right.
which is really for that quarter.
Right.
Right.
And that money is picked up as part of these revenues.
Because that looked good versus what it looks like
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is as of May.
Because the county didn't listen to you guys. and
Yes.
Keep it in.
Well, also,
Why?
and also there was some changes in the county distribution based on the
Right.
2010 census.
Census,
So
right.
all that stuff also got updated.
Right.
In the middle of page 46 is your expenditures and the reason that you are in business in summary form. Again, the detail appears on some subsequent pages. But you can see the original expenditure estimate of just operating expenditures were about 11.2 million. That got revised to about 11.6 million. And the reason for that increase and that revision was to fund the tax certiorari refunds. And we'll show you how you funded that. But you can see your categories. You have general government support. That's the administrative functions of the village. Treasurer's office, those kinds of things, clerk and stuff like that. But that's also where the tax certiorari expenses is paid out of on the general government support line. So you see the big jump from the original budget of $1.3 million to $1.6 million, and the actual result was about $1,558,000 savings from some other things in the budget. Public safety is obviously the cost of the police department and those kinds of things. Transportation are for like the roads, maintenance of roads, snow plowing, those kinds of things. Economic opportunity and development, Rob, is for the aging programs for the elderly. Culture and recreation, primarily your parks type programs. Home and community services is essentially the zoning and street cleaning and leaf collection and those kinds of things. And then you have employee benefits, and I know this came up in a conversation before the meeting started as regards OPEB. And one of the things to look at here is you can see that the actual employee benefits this year were $2,586,000. And if you look at the comparable number on page 47, they were $2,223,000. So the employee benefits jumped by over $300,000 in the current year. And that's a combination of factors. It's both the contributions to the state retirement systems for both your employees and your police. The rates went up dramatically from the state retirement systems from the state's fiscal year that ends March of 10 to the state fiscal year that ended March 11. The rates went up somewhere in the neighborhood of, I think, 40 to 50%. Employee rates went from 7 to 11. I don't recall offhand what the police rates went to, and those rates are going up again from the 11 to the state 12 year rates by another 30, 40%. So there's some sharp increases there, and of course the health insurance that was mentioned earlier, that's always good, unfortunately, for a double-digit percentage increase. So fringe benefits really went up, and if you look at the overall spending in the budget compared to last year, this year actual expenses came in at $11.3 million. And if you look back on page 47, they came in at about $10.6 million last year. So overall, your expenses went up about $700,000, and half of that was in fringe benefits. More than
And the other half in the tax surcharge.
and the rest was in the tax cert. So, I mean, that's basically it. Other than that, you held everything flat. I mean, relatively speaking. You'll also notice in the bottom third of the page, there's a section there called Other Financing Sources Uses. This is kind of a catch-all for certain other items that are not considered operating. And you see the first line in there is bonds issued. And this year you issued $350,000 in indebtedness in order to fund a tax certiorari refund that had to be made. So you have both the revenue recognition and you had the expenditure to pay it. So from a fund balance point of view, it washed out in the current year with the understanding that obviously you have to pay back the debt. So the $350,000 will be paid back over the life of that debt with interest, given, the interest rates are low today, but that is an obligation that you will have to budget and pay for over the years that the bond goes out. There's also some transfers in and transfers out. These are monies that are moved from some of those other funds that I mentioned that you operate a bunch of funds, primarily like water fund, capital fund, those kinds of things. So you see there was $517,000 that came into the general fund, primarily from the water fund, about a $275,000 monies that came back from the water fund into the general fund to reimburse for overhead type costs. And then there are transfers out, monies that go to other funds, primarily the debt service fund, to fund your debt service obligations for previously borrowed debt. About $1.2 million out of that $1.5 million is moved over to the debt service fund to finance your principal and interest obligations. So where does that leave us? When you get down to the bottom of 46, third number up in the actual column, you see a $51,000 number. That's pretty good news in this environment. That means your revenues exceeded your expenditures by $51,000. Essentially almost a break-even year, if you look at it that way, which in this environment is pretty good. But actually, it's really somewhat better than that, because if you look in the first two columns, the third numbers up from the bottom, you see some bracketed numbers there, -300, -542. So when you adopted the budget, you had a plan that your expenditures were going to exceed your revenues. You had planned it that way, you adopted the budget that way, knowing that you had fund balance to back you up. You were going to use your savings account to balance the budget. You had to take, and then in the revised plan, the final column, you thought you'd have to take a little more from your savings account to balance your operations, because you have to have a balanced budget. You come down to zero in those first two columns. New York State doesn't seem to need a balanced budget, but everybody else needs one here. So you come down to a balanced budget. So what you see by you having revenues exceed expenditures by 51 is not only did you not need to use your savings account to get through your year, but you actually added to your overall bottom line by 50,000. So that's why when you look in the variance column, it's a positive 593,000 on that line. You have a budget surplus, a positive budget variance of 593,000, which represents somewhere around 4% of the overall budget. So that means you monitored things very well. In this environment, the revenues are not going gangbusters. So you had to keep what expenditures you could control under control, and you managed to do that and still end up better than break even for the year. So I think that's a compliment to your, management and to the fund. I got to put a shout out to somebody. So overall, if you could see that you started the year with real fund balance of $3.4 million. And you ended the year with about 3.4 in total fund balance. If you go back to 45 is the balance sheet, which is the snapshot at May 31st of where the village was. And that 3.4 million is the second number up from the bottom. And in governmental accounting, in fund accounting, which is what we're doing here, unlike a regular business, this balance sheet just represents current assets, current liabilities. There's no long-term assets on here. If you were a business, you would see your capital assets, your machinery, your equipment, your buildings, your infrastructure. None of that's on this balance sheet, nor are your long-term liabilities, all the debt that you've borrowed, anything you owe the banks and short-term borrowing. None of that's on here. It's all current stuff. So up top in your assets section, you have total of $4.1 million in assets, and the good news is it's mostly in cash. That's where most of your assets are. And you cannot be in hedge funds, mutual funds, derivatives. You're not allowed to do any of that stuff in New York State. So this is all in FDIC-insured banks with collateral posted against it. So it's really as safe as any money in today's world. The flip side is it earns a 0.1% or whatever it's earning. So you got to take that for what it's worth. The liability section in the middle of the page, your main liability there is something called deferred revenues, and all that really is because you're a May year-end, you run a lot of summer programs, camp programs, park programs, different kinds of things, but you collect the money prior to the end of your fiscal year, but it's really for stuff that's going to happen after your fiscal year. The cash is in, it's not recognized as revenue. It's deferred revenue, and it will become revenue in your new fiscal year. The other number to note on there is, the other two numbers to note on there is a couple lines up from that. It says due to retirement systems, and we've been talking about that. Your liability this year is $175,000 compared to $102,000 from the prior year column, and that's because you're a May year end. The state's pension funds are on a March year end, so there's a tail that has to be picked up for the 2 months of your obligation that's going to be in the state's next year, and that's up because, as we mentioned, the rates are way up. So this is just a calculation of the salaries you've paid in April and May times the rates set by the state for the following fiscal year, those 2012 rates that are going up another 30-40%. So that's why that liability has increased. And the other number on there that you have to watch is that deferred tax revenues of $158,000. So those are people who haven't paid their taxes. So in this environment, you would expect that number to be higher because if people are having trouble paying the bills, maybe the tax bill is not on their priority list. It's still a relatively low number to your overall levy, but again, that means that $158,000 cannot be in your fund balance. We have to defer it until it's actually paid. So if somebody comes in tomorrow and pays that $158,000, that goes right to your fund balance. So when you take those assets of 4.1 and those liabilities, we
80
just
Wheeler
went through-
Avenue, second floor.
So 4.1 million minus the liabilities of 700, that's where we come up with that 3.4 fund balance. And you see, you have, this year anyway, 4 components of fund balance, and I'll tell you why I'm saying that in a second. You have a small amount that's reserved for prepaid, so there's some bills that are paid in May but are really for the next year. So, and it matches the number, the last number in the asset section, because you can't spend it, the cash is out the door. But it's a nominal amount. You have 151,000 set aside for future capital projects. So again, that would, by board resolution, you would take these monies for whatever projects you're deciding that you need this pot of money for. So right now, it just sits there until a decision, is reached. So what that leaves you with is 2 other numbers to make up the 3.4 million. 675,000 that says designated for subsequent years expenditures. So, that's a number. If you look to the comparative number for last year, you used 300,000, as I said, to balance the budget you're in now. You now use 675,000 of fund balance to balance this budget that you're in right now, 11-12. So, keep in mind that, when you use fund balance, it has the potential effect of being like a one-shot revenue. And the only way that it's not a one-shot revenue is if you replenish it during the 11-12 year, either by getting in revenues that you didn't anticipate or by spending less than you anticipated. If you went back to page 46 and we looked at the third number up from the bottom in the variance column, for this year, remember I said you had a budget surplus of 593,000? If you were to do the same thing next year, but you use 675, you would now see a diminishment of your fund balance. So unless you generate 675,000 either in revenues, over revenues, or underspending, you will begin to deplete your fund balance. Fortunately, you're in a strong fund balance position because, as you can see, your undesignated is still $2.6 million. It was $2.9 million last year, so it's $2.6 million, which still represents, somewhere in the neighborhood of 20% of your budget. So it's a very strong position. Certainly a strong position 3 years into this economic, whatever it is, since this all started 3 years ago. So you're in a very strong position, but it does mean, because you're relying on this use of fund balance, you really have to really start watching what's going on, in the budget.
Scott, can I just interject? Of that $675,000 that we designated for subsequent years expenditure for the
Okay.
current budget that I'm in now,
Yeah.
$350,000 was for a certiorari payment, just so
Okay.
to note that.
Because of the bond.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, no,
No.
it was the other half. We
Oh,
only
the other half.
half.
We bonded
Sorry.
half of it.
We only bonded
375.
half.
Okay,
We
gotcha.
paid
Right,
half
right.
out of fund balance
Okay.
appropriated to the general fund to
It was
pay.
really only 375.
So that's
So
one
my-
shot, so then you
my
use
point
It
was-
37.
wasn't one shot.
Yeah, my
right.
point is the operating budget really is only relying on $325,000 worth of fund balance. So
stand
next year we
corrected.
won't.
You're
No,
right.
it's not a correction.
Well, it's just an
You're right.
important
Qualification.
distinction there.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's correct.
No
So again,
certainty,
you
no
will-
certainty we won't have
Have
the
to do it
equivalent
again.
certs again.
No, so I
Right.
mean, you're certainly in good financial position, certainly better than a lot of other places that I have to go and
Yeah,
and
I just
speak
didn't want
before
people
them.
who were watching to think that maybe our operating budget was so far off that we were getting into,
My bad.
supplementing.
I
fund balance.
apologize.
No, that's okay.
And just to, reiterate some of the points that were discussed earlier, and if you ever need to fall asleep at night, the notes to the financial statements do provide a lot of information. The notes start on page 23 and continue through page 43. It gives you some information about, your structure and the fund structure and everything. And more importantly, when you get to things like on page 35, page 35 discusses the pension, which I know was obviously a hot topic, that came up before the meeting. And you could see, like in the middle of page 35, there's a chart there that gives you the current rates by tier. So you see the ERS rates for tiers 1 through 5, and you see the police and fire retirement system rates for tiers 1 and 2. And remember, these are the rates for March 11. The rates for March 12 went another 30-40% higher than these rates. And that's why I think you were getting to where you were talking that 25%, for the police and fire rates for the March 12 year, 25% of payroll. You could also see at the bottom of 35, there's a 3-year chart there showing you what the cost was to the village for both the ERS and the police and fire retirement rates, and you see how they're beginning to edge up. You see the ERS rate, is up 60-70% from just 2 years ago. And if this chart went back 4 or 5 years, the number would be even lower, because at one point the ERS rate 5-6 years ago was less than 1% of payroll, and it's now close to 15% of payroll. So I mean that's a major increase. The other thing that we would point out to you is on the bottom of page 36 is some of the long-term debt. Remember I said that balance sheet we looked at didn't have any of the village's debt? Doesn't mean we're not showing it somewhere. It actually appears on another schedule, but it's detailed here in the notes. On the bottom of 36, you see your bonds payable at the end of the year is about $18.4 million outstanding. You also have these other liabilities for compensated absences, that's unused vacation and sick leave that would be owed active folks upon their retirement. And you also see something for the OPEB obligation. And when you turn to page 37, it gives you a list of those bonds that you currently have outstanding and what their interest rates and when their maturities are. The bottom of 37 gives you a year-by-year for the first 5 years breakdown of what your debt service is. So your debt service right now is pretty consistently going to be about $2.2 million a year for the next 5 years. Obviously, this does not assume you issuing any additional debt. So this is just based on the existing debt that is outstanding, that your obligation is about $2.2 million a year. And this is for all funds. It's not just the general fund. It's water debt and the like. And if you go to page 40, Ed was speaking before from Danziger regarding your OPEB cost. The disclosure of the OPEB cost is a required disclosure, as he said, under GASB 45 that came out a couple of years ago. And to correct you, Mindy, on something you mentioned earlier, they are already up to GASB 63.
Oh, okay.
So
Sorry.
they already blew past your GASBs already.
I'm not familiar with GASB.
That's
Yes,
right.
you're lucky. But the one of those GASBs, well, several of them are important. The one that will be important to the village when we do the May 2012 audit is GASB 54. So you got to take 45. 50. Well, no,
All right.
you don't want 53, but 54, the reverse of 45. It's going to change how we present fund balance, as if it's not confusing
Right.
enough.
Change it in what way?
It will no longer be called reserves or designations or unreserved.
Right.
They now have 5 new categories to put things in.
Right.
And does
So-
that actually, in your view, produce more clarity? Or?
No, it's
I don't want to editorialize,
Doesn't it
but
make it more difficult for you to move funds out, in and out of there?
yes, it does. GASB 54 doesn't require it, but it's recommended that the governing boards adopt certain policies to say how certain fund balance
Right.
can be spent. It's kind of almost like default in New York. New York was pretty well set up for this because of the current structure, so it's easy to kind of just migrate to the new structure. But fund balance will now be in one of 5 categories: non-spendable, restricted, committed, assigned, or unassigned.
Right.
We could talk about more of
Sounds
that
the same to me.
next year. Because you don't have a lot of fund balance categories, it's not going to be that difficult, but we would recommend that the board look into adopting policies. There's some generic policy statements that you can make where you either delegate some authority to the business folks, and they are allowed to do certain things. Some things are done by law, so there's really nothing that you have to do. But there are certain things, and we could discuss those with Patty during as the year progresses here, to show you what kind of policy could be adopted. It's nothing heavily involved. But that's going to be the new presentation to confuse more for next year. But the OPEB cost that Ed was talking about appears on page 40, and thankfully our numbers match his, so that's always a good thing. You see, like in the middle of page 40 in that chart, you see what he was referring to as the annual OPEB cost, $1,090,000. You see the contributions made, $430,000. So he referred to all these figures to show that your net OPEB obligation was increased by $660,000 this year, bringing your obligation to $1,850,000. You see his $14 million number that's at the top. So again, what GASB did provide was it allowed auditors, or the provisions of this allowed us to not hit you with and show in your financial statements $14 million all up front, they allowed a nice grace period of 30 years to bring this in, over time to get the prior service costs brought in over a period of time. But all the assumptions are listed in here, how much you're paying. He was correct in saying there is no mechanism right now in New York State for you to fund it, even if you had the desire to fund it and tax your folks an extra $600,000 to pre-fund this. There was talk at the state a few years ago about creating a statewide trust fund, as it were, because it has to be established as an irrevocable trust, and this is all beyond my sphere of knowledge. But it would almost be like the state pension system, and the state was going to set up a statewide one, and you would
Well, we know how good that's working.
put your money in there. But along with all the other
So
problems
it's good to know that the trust is the magic bullet.
well, I mean, the concept is obviously to try to pre-fund some of this stuff so that it helps with your costs.
That was the idea with the
used up
pension
front.
fund,
Yeah.
right?
That was the idea.
Pre-fund it and get a return, and it's all good, till it's not.
The New York pension fund is actually probably one of the best
best,
ones
yeah.
in the country, and the state is probably the best in having their public employees' pensions funded, unlike our neighboring
Yeah, that's because we all
states.
raised taxes significantly
Right.
8 years ago in order to make that happen when they
Correct.
screwed it up the first time. And then they've increased it 15% every year over the last 3 years, so.
Which is easy to do since we're the ones that have to look at that tax,
Yeah,
not
exactly.
them.
Yeah. A piece of it does affect, the state itself, so,
What,
it's, well,
Yeah. What does that do?
for what it's worth. So in any event, I mean, that's all I have. Be glad to
So
take
I
any
have a
questions.
question for you. I mean, honestly, when you start to, in your profession, and more and more,
It's getting personal here. So.
no, more and more, if it's not villages, then the county or whatever, have got to be looking at these numbers and going, it's unsustainable, and everybody says it. But the right answer is not to shrug your shoulders and say,
No.
it's unsustainable. It's unsustainable. We've got 30 years to blow up, which
Well, I mean,
will probably,
listen, Ed said it, that it's going to be a combination of, doing something on the revenue side, which you're now going to be limited because of the tax cap, or doing things on the benefit side. So either, as you
And we
change,
can do neither.
or you do neither, and
we
it just,
can do neither. That's how we can't raise taxes, and we can't
yes.
we can't get give backs.
Yeah, because it was very
So
nice that.
What are we
that-
going to do?
Yeah, I mean, that they put this tax cap in, they did put an exemption in for certain increases in the retirement rates, but the
Funny arithmetic,
the amount.
2
that-
points.
It's 2 points, which
Yeah.
is, almost like
13%
20,
increase in
13,
cost, yeah.
15%. So, I don't have the answers, it's just going to be, obviously, as you go through the process, if you change the benefits that are provided, if you get more of an employee contribution, these numbers are going to change. But the OPEB number will always grow because unless it can be funded, which right now it can't be, it will grow.
right.
And it's always been there because it's never been funded.
Right.
So it's always been there, but now it's on paper.
But in a way, it's kind of like what accounting for the assets of the village, like the roads and the infrastructure and the big numbers that throws off too. Which
Well,
is-
again, it's only as good as the assumptions that are in here.
Correct.
If you use a 4% rate versus a 6% rate versus a 2% rate, the numbers are going to swing wildly.
Correct.
But basically, the concept is there.
Right.
The concept is there that this is out there, and they want the Moody's and the S&Ps and the investment community to be able to see a full picture of what you do. And there's more GASBs coming out. There's exposure drafts now because they want more disclosures about the pension plans. We're able to do a very minimal disclosure on the pension plans, a page worth of disclosure, because we just say, well, go see the state, because they have their own thing. That's not going to be good enough anymore. They're going to want more charts in here, more disclosures and everything. So they just keep coming out with this stuff to again try to make it more transparent, for the public to be able to truly see as much as possible.
Well, they see that we're trying to cut expenses everywhere, and they want to make sure that they protect their own. So I want to make sure you guys stay employed, so the more
Believe me, we don't
complicated
need
these
all
audits
this.
become, the more we have to rely on.
We don't need all this. I mean, it's just amazing the layers of stuff that have been added just in the last 10 years to what puts these things together. And it's we just have to keep up with it. I mean, that's our job, and you folks have to keep up with it because we can't. We're doing it from your record. So there's more and more stuff. So I know these folks are going to get up on GASB 54 and get up on 63 and all the other ones that are coming out. So can't wait.
So, I mean, we have this annual discussion about appropriate levels of fund balance, and by your description, as we've talked in past years, we're in a very positive position relative to lots of our peers. Even in a position that in more stable times arguably would be overfunding holding on to too much money. In the current environment, especially with tax certs rolling in as quickly as they are, it's hard to see that it's reasonable to go lower than we are, or certainly significantly lower than we are. Any comment on that?
Yeah, man, that's policy. We just audit. We understand. We know what the rating agencies want and what the investment community wants.
I mean,
we know what the taxpayers want.
The rating agencies look at our fund balance, which is, I think, by historical standards and by peer comparison standards, in a great position, and they say, "Well, gee, we wish you had more." I mean, of course, I guess rating agencies always wish you had more, right?
They're not looking to downgrade us in any way.
No.
I mean, at what point are they? I see a lot of downgrades going on out there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm dealing with one right now that actually got downgraded 2 notches.
Oh my.
We had
So,
a positive
yeah.
outlook when we last went to Moody's. We were one of the few municipalities in the state.
Right.
Yeah,
With a
I mean, they're
positive outlook.
downgrading everybody.
They're downgrading everybody.
But I have one that got downgraded 2
Trustee
notches.
Cunningham
Two
was on
notches.
that conference call.
Yeah.
too.
So,
So-
they're serious. But, your focus can't just be on that.
Right.
And you have services to provide. You have taxpayers. So, that's why I'm on this side and you folks are on that side.
Honestly,
Yeah.
the truth be told, $2.6 million is, it's relative to our budgets, a nice number. Relative to things that we're confronted every day with, it's a small number.
No.
So, it's, you got to put this stuff in perspective too.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you borrowed to pay a taxer. I
We
mean,
did.
if you had unlimited resources, you wouldn't borrow, you would just use your money to,
It was a
to pay.
discussion
So-
about
so
how
that
much of it
was,
to take
what
out
to
of
do.
cash and how much not to.
But it was
Right.
cheap to borrow then. So. And,
Right.
In an environment where tax certs last year could have sucked $1 million in cash out of our fund balance, it's enough to make people cautious.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah. And so you balanced it, and just like you have to balance, what the rating agencies want, what services you have to provide. That's, But, relative to what I've seen at other, municipalities, you're definitely still in a strong position.
even village to village or.
Village to village, towns, school districts, all.
Well, I add to that our infrastructure rehabilitation is in the last lap instead of, the first or the middle lap, and
Yes.
that's also very positive news for us. So, all right, any other questions?
Nope.
I thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Very
Promise to
much.
come back with equally good news next
Yes.
year, okay?
That's up to these folks here.
Well,
Robin,
thank
thank you
you,
very much.
Patty, Mary, and
Pam.
Pam, for the major role you all play in this. And I think it's apparent from tonight's presentation, as it is every year, that although we are a small business by business standards, the overlay of responsibilities we have means that it's a complicated business to keep track of, a complicated business to report it, and I'm pleased and proud to say the people we have doing it are doing a darn good job. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Mr. Mayor, I think this is a good place to switch tapes.
All right, brief break while we switch tapes in the camera.
I think.
Welcome back. We had a brief break there while we switched the tape in the camera. Thank you for your patience. Our discussion tonight in work session led off with a discussion of some of the impacts we anticipate with the 2% tax cap, and in particular, we have been given the numbers for the state pension contributions last year, which, as you just heard, are spiking again, as they have in the last several years. And more on that later. I think we'll almost certainly touch on tax cap issues 2 weeks from now when we have our joint session with the Pleasantville School Board, which is an annual event, both to make clear the discussions going on our side of the table about what we are confronting and what we might do about it, but also to make sure that the public recognizes how the system works to the extent that anyone can figure it out. One of the frustrations we've had over the course of the last week as we looked at the pension numbers that just came into us for our forthcoming fiscal year is that even in Albany, they're scrambling to try to figure out what their own legislation actually means, how it ought to be interpreted, and what it all means going forward. So there will be lots to say about that over the next some months, and we encourage you to listen in. Patty, could you just give us a brief update on the Sawmill River Advisory Board meetings and the issues surrounding flooding that we have been
I'd be
dealing
happy
with?
to. We had a kickoff meeting about a week and a half ago, and at the table sat not only our local legislator, John Nona, but several other legislators that were involved in communities that abut the Sawmill River Parkway, as well as representatives from all of those towns and villages and agencies such as the Army Corps of Engineers, the State Department of Transportation, and the State Department of Environmental Conservation. So anybody who had any interest in the issues involving the river, the flooding and its impacts were there, which was very helpful. And there was a general discussion about the lack of maintenance on the corridor, the Sawmill River corridor, and DOT had explained that they were focusing on just on the pavement issues and making sure that the pavement was free and clear of debris, and that they were not involved in stream maintenance at the time of Hurricane Irene or Tropical Storm Irene. And the Army Corps had said that since it's not a navigable water, they really don't have jurisdiction over cleaning either. So there was some discussion that DEC actually had initiated about having each community map out its portion of the river, find out which properties under where that river flowed over, because the property that the river actually passed over was the property owner of that underlying stream bed, and those people are responsible or can be responsible for cleaning. So in some communities, the river goes through private backyards. Here, we're lucky. 90% of the river goes through state DOT land.
Is that lucky?
Yes, because state
Easier
DOT
to
is
figure out who owns
yes,
it,
that's
not
right.
necessarily easier to get anything
and who
done.
can maintain it under the special permit, because the governor, if you remember when the Catskill area had gotten hit very hard, had allowed some emergency variances to the environmental laws to allow them to go in and mitigate some damages to streams and to rivers, because they needed to get in quickly without permits and move debris. So there was a small window of opportunity to get in and clean the sawmill.
What's the other 10%?
The other 10% in our village are some private property owners that their yards abut the Sawmill River. And they would be the ones that under permit would be able to go in and remove debris.
Isn't the New York State DOT exempt from seeker in New York State?
I had asked that question specifically, if they were exempt from the permit requirements. They are not. They have an obligation to obtain a permit, interagency permit. They do have a blanket permit, so they are able.
But this would be a blanket permit for maintenance.
That's right.
Under
They
seeker,
already
so
have
essentially
that.
they could go in.
That's right.
But
They already have that. So
pretty
when
much
we
on a notice-only basis, and
That's correct.
carry out the work that needs to
So
be
when we
done.
sit again at the table and we have our maps, the county's GIS office had designed these for every community, and they look good. Ours wasn't complete, so I had to comment on that, and hopefully I'll get a complete set of maps. I'm going to ask Matt Brennan Schultz if he's watching tonight, because he did, as you saw, in an email offer to help in this matter too. I'm going to ask him to help identify the properties along the sawmill in the village, and maybe do an inventory with some volunteers to see the condition of the river in certain parts of the village that are not under DOT's responsible control.
I think you could get Frank Lacasio on that committee as well.
Yes, probably could,
Yeah.
probably could. And then we'll meet again. I mean, and hopefully when we meet
Well, I
again,
think
there'll
he
be
would
some
want a map, too.
there'll be some sense of ownership. Somebody will
Right.
take ownership here, because we don't, as a village, have any responsible control over any of this.
Right.
And it's
So DOT, and then we have to compel our property owner, I mean, can you compel the property owners to clean the river? You know, what are they supposed to stand out there?
Yeah,
in the-
Elmsford just went through this exercise where they actually took out the permit on behalf of some of their residents, and they've been cleaning the sawmill out. It's been on the news the last few days.
know what they do,
I would
bill the
suggest
residents?
that we take it on as a public works. We're only moving some logs, and we're not dredging. We're just trying to clear debris.
Yeah.
So there may be a way for us to do this with a permit on their behalf.
Could you touch also, oh, go ahead.
Would this help us, or isn't it that we have to sort of clear it out downstream? I mean, it doesn't really help to clear it out upstream if downstream isn't cleared out.
There's two problems here. One is the damming that takes place because downstream is clogging, the water and backing up the water. But we also have bottlenecks, in this area, like by Lacasio's house. There's not a big enough area in the culvert to take the volume of water, so it spills over. So there are two problems here. One is an engineering issue, a design issue. The other is a maintenance issue.
Well, and I mean, thirdly, in circumstances like we've had in the last couple of months, there's just no place to put the water
No.
anywhere. It doesn't matter how big the culverts are or how clean the stream is, the system just can't do it.
No, but
Right.
when that little river gets to be,
Right.
25 feet wide and 4 feet deep in Pleasantville, that's a problem.
Sure is.
What's the south limit of the village line and the river?
The southern limit is
Where's it?
just past
Where's it
South
exit the village?
South View Street,
Where
right
at?
around the end of South View Street. If you
Down
take
past the Parkway Fields.
yes, the opposite side of
Right.
Parkway Field, the opposite side of the Parkway.
Roughly where the first flooding always happens, in that curve between
Crosses
Grand
over
Street
the
and
park.
Marble
Right.
Avenue.
I can share the maps with you as soon as they give me a full set.
I mean, it's roughly opposite the cell tower, right?
Yes, that's right.
You see the cell
Right.
tower, it's
Yep,
it's
yep,
just
that's
about
right.
there. So, could you touch also, you raised the notion, as we have talked in the past, about a system of detour signs?
I did. I mean, it was somewhat related to our discussion there, but I did ask DOT's representative to inquire whether or not they could put permanent alternate route signs up throughout the village, at least in three locations. And the county police had already come up with what they believe is a fairly good detour plan. But I believe we need permanent signs up, not just temporary or barrels when they close this parkway, or
We need help.
I mean,
orange
what-
horses and duct tape.
As
It
everybody
gets very
knows,
messy.
when the parkway gets closed, people are fed off the parkway at Grand Street or at Manville Road on the southbound lane and at Marble Avenue and northbound lane, and they end up in the village of Pleasantville and not having any idea where to go next. So,
Right, and it's very simple. I mean, on Marble Avenue, you come off at that exit, you're looking at the light, there should be a sign across the street saying Sawmill North, detour.
At
I mean,
subsequent,
it's
at a
just that
subsequent
easy, so-
meeting, legislator Nona brought up when we had at the county, when they had emergency personnel in, he brought it up, the signage that you had mentioned
Okay,
in that
good.
meeting, from you mentioning it at the meeting, that, if they could do anything about that, and they have said, yes, now they will get involved with that.
They really
In
need
the past,
to.
when we
I
asked
mean,
them, they
it
didn't
would-
do it, but
And they need to close that
Yeah.
road with more in a more
When-
professional manner.
When the road is
because
closed at the south end of the village
Mm-hmm.
here, are you typically able to get back on at Grand Street?
Yes, northbound.
Typically, although
Northbound only, but yeah.
post Irene, it was
post
crazy.
Irene, they couldn't do it.
It was worse
but
than ever, but,
Sometimes
yeah.
they can.
And coming southbound, if it's flooded, where are they routed? Are they?
I mean, typically, you're getting off at Manville, and if you can continue through Memorial Plaza and down to Marble Avenue, you could get back on. Now, what happened in both that crazy storm we had
June
back in the late
23rd.
spring,
Mhm.
and then obviously again with Hurricane Irene, is that the flooding was far more widespread than that, and also closed down the Taconic. So people were trying to get to 9A, they were trying to get to the Taconic, trying to get to the sawmill, and were blocked in every direction. So
Plus, if they get off at Marble in Thornwood, and they take Broadway to 117, on that June 23rd storm, we were flooded in on Bedford Road there, and that's where they do
Right.
that cut through to get back on in Chappaqua, and
Right.
they couldn't do that.
I mean,
They were really, it was really
hopefully
bad.
it's not going to happen like that with any regularity, but
Do they
So-
have the signs up at the top, or different places, the electronic signs? At one point, when they were in
They
here,
do, yeah, they do.
a couple of years ago, when they raised the Sawmill River, they were going to put the signs in, the electronic signs saying that giving people warning that the parkway was closed much further up. so-
They've been doing that, which is very helpful.
Much further north. The other thing the county has is they spend a significant amount of money, and I don't know, we'd have to talk to Commissioner Shu there, but they spent a significant amount of money on these, how to close the Bronx River Parkway. And they have a chain and these barriers. I don't know, I've never seen one closed. You see them if you go down the Bronx River Parkway, they're built into the sides of the road, so they can create a barrier right away. They can close it down right away.
Probably how the Tappan Zee Bridge works too, when they move that
Yeah,
lane
it's-
over.
It's not
pretty
as,
interesting.
these are plastic, so people have driven through them and damaged them, and I think each one is like a couple $1,000s, so, they've barreled through them and ended up being flooded, and, I know the county's looking at ways to recoup some of that money from those vehicles, but in any event, that may be a good thing so we could close it, they can close it in a little more, without those orange barriers where people do go around them.
They're not even lit. I mean,
Yeah, they're
they
not
don't have-
lit. They're, if it's nighttime, you don't even know. It's terrible. You're absolutely right. The lighting. These have blinkers on them.
So, I mean, there is another meeting, I think it's set for next Thursday? I'll have to check.
Yeah.
But there's another meeting coming up, and then we'll...
The detour
have more
signage
report.
would be a relatively inexpensive item, I would think.
That's not...
yeah, we've
I mean, I would-
asked for that a number of times and
I would do
happily
it, but
gotten the
we're
most
not,
positive
you know,
response.
I'd be
that we've
happy to
ever
do it,
had
but we're
now,
not
so-
responsible
Yeah.
for doing it. so-
Well, if the detour
It's a few
signage is
$100s.
on village streets, do we need, why wouldn't we just do it ourselves?
We could.
Because there's certain, those are state signs, they have certain...
And we were
looks to
seeking
them.
to have
We
the
could
cost
do
of
it.
that paid for by the state and or the county, since after all, it's a problem that is foisted upon us by their road. So,
And they have to just merely seek our permission because who's enforcing it is the issue.
Right.
that said, you make, we have several neighborhoods who are badly affected when there's a
Yes.
closure like that.
West
And,
Juarez.
it would be, we'll just keep close tabs on that sign strategy.
We're very lucky we
See
have
whether we can
Patty
push
there.
that forward. Well, we are lucky to have Patty there,
Patty.
lucky to have you and John,
Yeah, we're-
Nona at the county keeping an eye on things as well. So I just glad to have that update and to let everybody know that flooding issues in general obviously are paramount in everybody's mind, given what we've all been through lately. And the sawmill is obviously a big picture problem. We also, as many people are aware, have problems in various different neighborhoods that we're looking at to try to be as inventive as we can to try to ameliorate the problems in an environment where there's very little money to be had to spend on them. So, anybody else have anything else new before we go to the resolutions? Okay. We already did Resolution 202, appointing Juan Garcia to sergeant, pick up Nindy with 203.
Resolved that the pre-check register dated October 10th, 2011, covering numbers 70562 through 70689, has been reviewed, and they are hereby approved as listed below. The general fund, $186,164.69. The water fund, $3,125.54. The capital fund, $54,939.45. The refuge fund, $8,197.02. The pool fund, $7,114.64. The trust and agency fund, $1,184, for a total of $260,725.34.
Is there a second?
Second.
Comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, John, 204.
Resolved, the Board of Trustees has reviewed minutes of the meetings held on Monday, September 26, 2011, and they're hereby approved.
Is there a second?
Second?
Comments or corrections? Let me just remind everybody that one piece of this that's just described as a one-liner is that our building inspector, Mike Testa, presented an overview on what's going on in the building department. And the thrust of that was that there are some 20 or 30 projects in the downtown commercial district going on, some large, some small, but he characterized that as the busiest he has ever been in his 20-some-odd years with the village in terms of activity in the commercial district. So we are pleased about that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion approved. Number 205.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby authorizes the village administrator to sign the easement agreement with Green Meadow Homeowners Association for the purpose of installing a new water and storm drainage line in accordance with the Phase 10 water main improvement project.
Is there a second?
Second.
We are in the midst of an improvement that has already begun in the old village in front of the area by Mangiari and Michaels and Nevaya and on the way down Bedford Road towards Manville to replace a water main, and the new route of that goes up Hayes Hill and out Green Meadow to Church Street. That is the reason we need this easement agreement with the Green Meadow Association, because Green Meadow is actually a private road. Any comments or questions?
Mayor, just for the record, this obligates the village to restore the road.
Understood, as we should. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion approved. Number 206.
Resolved, the Board of Trustees hereby authorizes the Town of Mount Pleasant Assessor to remove parcel 106.7-3-3, 7 Banks Hill Road, from the Sawmill County Sanitary Sewer District, as said parcel meets all required exemption criteria.
Is there a second?
Second.
Patty, you want to describe this one?
Yeah, the county does have a sanitary sewer district that involves all properties in the village, as you know. All of our sewage is conveyed to a county treatment facility down in Yonkers, so we're in a certain district called the Sawmill River Sewer District, and any property within the village that's within our sewer system has to pay a sewer tax to the county. And there are exemptions to this tax, and one property in particular in the village is applying for an exemption simply because they're on a septic, so they're not using the county sewer system or our sewer system. Their parcel does not have a failing septic, and they are within a certain distance from a sewer line, which makes it impossible for them to get to a municipal sewer. So they're petitioning to be removed from the district, which in essence means that that tax gets picked up by the rest of the properties in the village. That's why this board needs to consent to that removal.
Patty, is this the back end of the approval or the front end? Because I know that it goes through a process in the county where it has to go through committee, to the Board of Legislators.
This is the first
It has to go
step.
through the planning department.
Yeah.
So
This
it's
is
not
only-
it shouldn't be removed until that you get the approval, the final vote from the Board of Legislators, and then it comes back to us.
Yeah.
Because essentially this process, when it gets to the county, can take months, because it has to go through the planning department, it has to get a secra, it has to, even though it's being removed because it has a septic, the process that it goes through is lengthy, and it's really not technically approved, any of these, until the Board of Legislators,
Well, this is
Westchester County approves
this is
them.
an authorization, not an approval.
well, that's why I'm asking if it's
Yeah, I mean, maybe it could be
to
written a
remove it
little...
from the assessment now is premature, that this is the first end of it. That's why I asked if it was the front end or the back end. Because after we have to first recommend it to the county, then they go through this lengthy process, and then once they pass it, it comes back to us for the final approval.
Okay. Well, the good news is if we can get it out for him for the next year,
Yes.
you know, we could
Well,
try to catch
we have
that
to get it. It
tax.
has to go through the committee.
Okay.
But
And then
is
it
there
goes
any
back to
reason
the Board of
that
Legislators.
our authorization isn't appropriate at this stage?
No,
Okay.
they need our authorization.
Okay.
It's our recommendation, actually,
So
to the
we'll write it,
county.
we'll change the resolution to reflect that we have no objections to the county removing the
Okay.
parcel.
Yes,
So-
and then they put it, you have
right.
to send this to the county, and then, it all comes through your legislator,
Okay.
and we.
So what I'll do is, I'll send it to John certified or stamped
No, it goes,
resolution.
you have to
Okay.
send it to, I guess, I'm trying to think of who it comes to first.
Well, it's okay. We can,
Right.
this really came from the town assessor's
Okay,
office.
so is the
Yeah.
mover okay with change the resolution to read that we are indicating that we have no objection as opposed to authorizing.
Right,
True? Yes?
exactly, yeah, yes.
Okay, Steve, it was your resolution, wasn't it?
Yep.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion approved. Number 207, Minnie.
Whereas 434 Manville Road was purchased by the Village of Pleasantville, now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Pleasantville hereby authorizes the village treasurer to remove 434 Manville Road from the village tax roll and abate 2011 taxes.
Is there a second?
Second.
434 Manville Road is the former Lane Plumbing property, which we have now purchased and which will be paved momentarily, right, Patty?
Yes, momentarily.
And it will become a permit parking lot by day, available to anybody after 3 p.m. on weekdays and all day Saturday and Sunday. Motion approved? Motion, all in favor?
Yes, aye.
Aye. Motion approved. Jonathan, 208.
Whereas 126 Oak Ridge Road receives garbage removal services from the town of Mount Pleasant, now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Pleasantville hereby authorizes the village treasurer to remove 126 Oak Ridge Road from the residential garbage district.
Is there a second?
Second.
Similar situation where there's a property that had been inadvertently taxed as part of our garbage district when in fact their garbage is provided by.
This doesn't require a lengthy...
All in
county-
favor?
No, that's not the county.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion approved. Number 209, Brian.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby declares that the Manville parking lot improvements will have no environmental impact, and further authorizes the village administrator to sign the Secra Short Environmental Assessment Form.
Is there a second?
Second.
Manville Road, Manville parking lot improvements are improvements to the back of the building that has
That's right.
the bookstore, MacArthur's, Dunkin' Donuts, the cleaners.
That's correct.
Glass Onion.
And because they're using part of our property, we had to do an environmental review. This is short form was fine.
We have agreed with the owner to allow them to encroach modestly on public property in that lot in order to create a back sidewalk and create the capacity to get into the store from the back. And in exchange for that, they are dramatically improving the back of the storefronts. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion approved. Number 111, Steve.
Is it 111 or 210?
111.
111.
Yeah, we did miss,
11.
for some reason, we don't have a 10, right?
210.
Oh, hold it, the agenda's backwards here. The agenda says 10, the resolution says 11. We should renumber that resolution, right, to 110?
Yes, the one
Yes.
following it.
The donations,
Okay.
Accepting donations,
that's
yes.
10.
Should go to 210 rather than 111.
210,
That's
yes,
right.
210.
All right. Resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby accepts the donation in the amount of $10 to the Clinton Street Senior Center for senior programs.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you very much to the donors, much appreciated. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion approved, 211.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Pleasantville hereby approves the following budget amendments to appropriate general fund balance to cover Bank of New York tax certiorari and tree project. Amount to increase $35,585.79 to the judgments contract services, and the amount of $15,000 for shade trees.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussions or question? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion approved, 212. Jonathan.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Pleasantville hereby declares that the Parkway Terrace improvements will have no environmental impact, and further authorizes the village administrator to sign the SEQA Short Environmental Assessment Form.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion approved. Is there any further business or anything to report?
No.
All right. We thank you all for your attention. Congratulations again to now Sergeant Juan Garcia of our Pleasantville Police Department. We are pleased to have you on board at this new rank. We look forward to your tuning in 2 weeks at our next regular meeting. Remember that we will start at 7:30 because we have a joint meeting with the Pleasantville School Board, and then pick up with a regular Village Board meeting at 9 o'clock. Thank you all. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passed. Meeting is adjourned. Thanks very much. See you in a couple of weeks.
Good night.